Welcome back to the Pat Podcast, episode 15. I should just stop saying the episode names because it implies continuity. Today, I'll be talking about the concept of guilt. Do we not know what guilt is? I think everybody knows what guilt is, and if you don't, you should feel bad. If this is your first time here, maybe consider subscribing to the channel to hear more crazy rants like this from a guy like me who's crazy and you've just met. If you would like to give it a thumbs up, that would be very helpful here. And also, if you hit the little bell, it will tell you when more crazy rants are going to come up from the crazy person. Thank you so much for joining us. So guilt. It's the one thing that all of us have to experience at least one time in our life. Usually it comes from either an action, an inaction, something that we intended to do, or self-provoked type guilt. Some of which is akin to, let's say, our eating habits. We said we wouldn't eat that pizza. It was available in the break room. It was for everybody to have. But you know that you shouldn't have it. So you decide to eat the pizza, and then you experience what's called guilt. Why do we feel guilt? It's a self-preservation. In my opinion, it's a self-preservation notion that allows us to realize that we've gone too far. We've done something that we knew better, or rather had a better idea about, and we shouldn't have done the thing that we said we weren't going to do, or we should have done the thing that we said we were going to do. But where is guilt good and where is guilt wrong? Where is guilt not deserved? And that is a very slippery slope. In the example that I gave you of eating, it is a wonderful motivator to help you lose weight and to help you stay healthy because you are using it to feel the pressure of what you're doing. And honestly, I feel like the best way that you can use that guilt is social accountability, talking to other people about it, asking other people, telling other people what it is you're doing so that they can help you stay on top of it. Stay true to the decision that you made. And in another podcast, I talked about motivation and the desire that has to come from within, which is that very topic, is that if you've made the decision not to do something, the motivation to continue doing it has to come from yourself and not from an external source. However, accountability, I feel, is very different because now you have people who can join in on making you feel bad whenever you skip doing something that you knew you weren't supposed to do. But in this case, it's a great motivator to help you do that. But where is guilt wrong? Where is guilt evil? I believe guilt also comes from people who are the most guilty are the people who are the easiest to take advantage of. They're the easiest to manipulate. They're the easiest to, they're easily the most overgenerous, and they're easily the most taken advantage of. That's the word I'm looking for. And what ends up happening is they're the ones that they have those commercials that try to invoke an emotional response. Again, in the other podcast, I was using the example of the commercial where they have the animals in the cages and they play the very sad song and they want you to go adopt a thing. These are the people that are a marketer's dream because they're driven by emotional response and especially by guilt. They could be donating to their church. They could be donating at the homeless shelter. They could be purchasing food for the needy. They could be doing all this stuff, but they'll see a commercial about cats and dogs being in cages and then forget it. I have to go in a dog or a cat because I'm a monster for not doing that. And these people are the harshest on themselves, harsher than anybody else. And they'll take a slight, it comes from insecurity. It comes from an insecurity, and that insecurity allows them to pinpoint a small detail in somebody else's perspective or person's personality or how they're acting, and they will overreact that into guilt and compel them to do something that wasn't even actually a thing or wasn't even actually as big a deal. Those people are self-destructive. Those are extremely self-destructive people. So how do you avoid the guilt that is wrong for you? And how do you embrace, I don't want to call it guilt, how do you embrace commitment to something rather than the guilt of not doing something? Well, I feel the best way to avoid guilt is just not to feel it. Or rather not, that sounds so simple, right? Yeah, well, just don't feel guilty. But that's not always the case. How do you discern when to feel guilty and when not to? Well, I feel like if you made a spontaneous decision to do something, you're about to go to a sporting event. Then you get closer to the sporting event and you decide, actually, I don't want to go. I don't want to do this. And you say, nope, I can't make it. Sorry, I'm not going to go after all. And I'm not talking about like a medical emergency. Or I'm not talking about like family member passed away or something like that. You really should feel guilty Because what you did was you made a decision to do something and at the last minute decided, nope, I'm not going to do it. You said, yeah, I'm open to the idea. No, you should have just shut it down from the very beginning. If you knew you weren't going to want to go, like, you know what, there's a good chance I'm probably not going to go. But if I change my mind, I'll let you know. That is a more satisfactory response than, yeah, I'll go. And then at the last minute, oh, you know what, never mind, I can't go. That implies an immaturity in my opinion. And yes, you should totally feel guilty about that. You may see this weird, for those of you that are watching the video portion of this, you may see this weird light behind me. I'm having some struggle lighting this particular area of my studio, if you will. So I wanted to add some light to it, but as a result, my amateur self keeps moving and letting the light shine through. Here it is. Wait, where is it? Where is it? You know, it's funny. I do it on accident, yet here I'm trying to do it on purpose. It's not happening. Okay. I might need to edit that part out. But what about when you should not feel guilt? Sporting events coming up. There's a person who really wants to go. They're asking you to go. You've already concluded within yourself, I do not want to go. And it's not because you don't appreciate this person, not because you don't like this event or whatever. You just know that I'm not going to do well in this situation. I don't care for this type of thing. I don't want to let this person. I want this person to explore other options of people he might want to invite before they invite me. Then you say no. No, I do not want to go. I'm very sorry. It's just I'm not into that sort of stuff, but I appreciate you thinking of me. You know what I mean? Then they turn around and they say, well, that's messed up. You never go anywhere. You should want to go. I don't understand why. That's when you should not feel guilty. And I argue you should feel contempt for that person. No, not really. No, you shouldn't feel contempt for that person. People who are insistent on their point of view despite your disagreements are what I call unreasonable. Prisoners to their own emotions, but that's a whole other discussion. Prisoners of emotions. I'm going to write that down, actually, because I want that to make sure I cover that as a topic. There's no guilt required there from you. You've done your part. You've explained in a polite, professional manner that you do not wish to participate in the thing that you're being asked to do. The correct response to telling some of that is, yes, I understand. That's no problem. Thank you. I just want to see if you'd want to go. But I have no one else to go with me. So did you buy those tickets with me in mind or with you in mind? Did you actually think it was going to be fun for me? Did you ask me whether or not I would want to go with you before you bought the tickets? Were you prepared to go by yourself? Or did you just assume that I would go with you? I mean, those are all questions that you can ask to the person who just assumes things of you and expects things of you that you did not agree to in the first place. That's called entitlement, and those people do not deserve your guilt whatsoever. I'm sorry, they don't. The objective of this conversation is to help you navigate the two differences. And I feel like the easiest way to navigate it for yourself, because I found my way of doing it, but the way for you to navigate it is to really explore what the definition of guilt is, like we're doing here, breaking down the word guilt into understandable concepts. Guilt is a result of pressure. Pressure from yourself, pressure from an external force, pressure from an idea, a concept. But that guilt, that pressure is applied. Pressure is always applied. Applied by whom? A concept, a person, or yourself? Why is that person applying that pressure? Is it because they feel guilty and they want someone in to join in? Is it because you feel like you should feel guilty about something, which is the most dangerous one in my opinion? Or because a concept or an idea is making you feel guilty? What about that concept is applying that pressure? Okay, let's start with the external pressure. A person goes to the Humane Society. They want to purchase a cat. I think they're heroes, as long as they don't declaw the cat. Those people are known as monsters. But they want to purchase a cat. They go across this litter of kittens, and there's only 2 of them left. They see that there's 2 kittens left. He calls you, says, hey, there's another cat here. I don't want to separate 2. What if I adopt 1 cat and you adopt the other one? Well, no, thank you. I don't need a cat right now. I would love a cat, but I can't afford to have one right now. It's not fiscally responsible for me to do one. Perfectly acceptable answer, right? But they're going to separate them. Well, why don't you get to 2 cats? Oh, I can't get 2 cats. I can only get 1 cat. Well, why would you bring up the concept then? Well, I guess I'm just not going to get a cat then. Because then I'll have to separate them and I won't be that person. Okay, I guess not. Oh, come on, just get the other cat. And that continues. They feel guilted, so they begin to apply pressure to you in the hopes that you will respond to that in the form of guilt. But they're little cats and nobody wants them, and then this one's going to be all alone, and then they're going to put the cat down, or they're going to soak them in peanut butter and roll them in graham crackers and feed them to the cobra. Like, Jesus, that sounds terrible. Never mind. But it was their guilt that pushed you, or is attempting to push you into a guilt-based decision. That guilt is extremely frustrating, extremely annoying, but is also the easiest to sidestep. And that's really what you do. If something's pressuring you, instead of trying to push back against the pressure and argue against it, you just say, no, that's okay. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. They're going to slaughter. And it's never as bad as they think it's going to be. There's probably someone in line right behind them that are like, hey, if that guy gets that cat, maybe I'll get the other one. But they never see that because they're so into their mental concept of that. You have to allow yourself to be able to sidestep it, because if you don't, then you do take that guilt. You take another person's guilt upon yourself, and then now it's your responsibility. And now they're mad at you because they can't understand why you don't feel guilty for the thing that they feel guilty for. And the difference is emotional maturity. It's really all that is. It's an emotional maturity that they shouldn't be feeling different about this than me. And the only explanation is that they're heartless and they're emotional. No, it's just because they're capable of making decisions outside of emotional pressures. And you should certainly make all of your decisions without emotional context. They can be it's going to get into dangerous territory here. You can motivate yourself to a decision through an emotional context, such as the idea that I would like to have a cat, but then after the emotion and the honeymoon period ends, you would want to be able to say, hey, is this the right decision for me? Is this the right decision at this time? Do I have the ability to afford such a thing? Can this be done in a way that's not going to affect others or me in an inverse way? No, it can't. It's going to affect other people. I'm not going to do this. Okay, you're done. Decision made. So now you've equipped yourself with what you need to be able to handle whatever pressure comes from an external source of guilt. And now it's that person's fault for placing it on you. It's the same people who go out of town without telling you, like, hey man, can you come over and watch my dog? Or can you watch my dog while I'm out of town? Did you ask me? Well, no, but I mean, it just kind of came up last minute. Yes, if you're a friend or something, I can get that. But if as a friend, you also have the responsibility not to do that to other people. Hey man, can you come over and feed my dog? I'll give you $100. Hell yeah. Okay, done. But there's an exchange. There's not an obligation, a guilt to it. Or, hey, this is my friend. I want to do this for him. Okay, I'll do it. That's fine. You're presented with the opportunity and you say yes. But if you say no, there should be no guilt in that. And I say this because I've met many people who do that with expectation. And it's very frustrating. Go through that. Okay, concept. What did I mean by guilt by concept? Guilt by concept is... I'm trying to think of a way to explain this without sounding like a terrible person, because usually whenever I try to explain guilt of concept, it's more of it makes me sound like a terrible person, but it's not that. It's not that, because there are times where, remember I said guilt is justified, and guilt can help you, motivate you to do the things that you're supposed to do, but other times it can't. Other times it shouldn't. You grow up. You were brought up to believe a certain faith. You're brought up to believe a certain type of religion. You're brought up to believe a great religion. That's the least thing. That should tell you something about how difficult this is. You are always told that this is what life was. You were given the building blocks for the foundation of your existence based off of these building blocks. And these building blocks are called concept, because it's a concept someone derived for building blocks in life. And unless you agree with them, I'm very fortunate that I tend to agree with the building blocks that I was given, because I do believe there is a God and all that. But other people are given these concepts and they reject them. That's fine. Matter of fact, that's what this is about, is you take those building blocks and you question them, but then, your grandmother or your aunt or uncle is fully invested into this concept. And so when you begin to explore other options, it comes across, and I guess it could be seen as external guilt as well, but this is more a concept, because in your mind you're thinking, I'd rather avoid the hassle of having to change my perspective than have to go through the problem that is trying to justify this new belief, even though I align more with it than the original one. And that guilt from concept can affect a life-changing decision. It really can. Now, am I turning around and saying that you should go and convert them to your new belief? Absolutely not, because then you become the external guilt pressure. That is absolutely not a good idea. That is terrible. But if you by yourself believe in something that means something to you, but nobody else around you does, you have no obligation to have to change who they are. I feel actually the best way to change someone's belief is to set an example with what you believe to be true, and that will inspire people to change based off of how you do with what you're believing in. But if you're halting or ceasing your change simply because you're worried about the effect it's going to have on other people, then you certainly do fall into a category of where you're going to self-destruct, because then it's kind of like trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. It's just not going to happen. And you're trying to justify it for the sake of keeping the peace, and that's where you get into the realm of these people who pretend to be one person so that they can accomplish a goal, and then they end up not being that person. And not only are they unhappy, but now they've done damage because they've tried to do something that doesn't apply to them because they're trying to mimic somebody else, or they're trying to do something else. It's a horrible concept. And then it goes back to that, is the guilt of concept. In order to accomplish a goal, I have to act a certain way, to do a certain thing, to believe in this ideology or this structure. I'm going to believe in that stuff because that's, in my mind, the most effective way. But you don't subscribe to that. You really don't believe it. You don't have the conviction of it. That is a dangerous form of guilt. Do not give in to that guilt. It is not pretty. It is not pretty at all, because then those are the people that go onto a stage and they try to explain their backing point, but because they lack conviction, they fall apart and they get frustrated, and they'll just want to go for the short answer, like, nope, no, that person's just ignorant. No, that person just doesn't know anything. I'm just going to discredit that person because they don't agree with the concept that I'm using to try to get away with other people. And then when you find out you're wrong for that concept, and the worst part is if you try to align with a concept you don't believe, and then you meet a person that believes the concept you really do believe, and that person rips you apart because they can actually be convicted in what they're talking about and they know what they're talking about, that's when you'll feel the worst, because you actually do agree with this person, but you've decided that you don't want to agree with them. So now you're defending a standpoint you don't believe with, and because it's popular. Because it's popular. That's the best way to put it. People will agree with the building blocks of what's popular nowadays, even if they don't inwardly believe it. And that's the biggest form of the ugliest guilt you can go with, and you should never follow that guilt, at least in my opinion. And the last bit of guilt, internal pressure, which I believe to be the most dangerous of all of them. Well, how is that any different from guilt of concept? Oh, it's very different. Expectations of yourself. This is where it gets scary. And you have to be very careful about how you handle this form of guilt. You see the world as you would like to see it. You create this utopic concept of how the world should be. And you always hear this world, be the change in the world you want to see. So then you raise expectations for other people. And you raise expectations for yourself. Not healthy expectations, unrealistic expectations. The expectations that make you want to feed the homeless and then contribute to the church and then adopt the poor cat and then be able to go build homes and then be able to rub feet for nuns. Sorry, that's the best concept I can come up with. The point is, you overstress yourself into this unrealistic expectation of yourself, and then you don't achieve it, and you self-destruct because you feel like it should be possible. I should be able to do all these things. I should be able to do that. And you get consumed by this guilt that was self-imposed. But I have the energy. I have the time. Not always. Not everybody is a 9,000% person. Sometimes they can only do the best that they can. And that's usually where people explore concepts like this, what I'm doing, podcasting, because they're looking for that small area in their life where they actually can apply that desire to want to help or change or make a creative outlet or whatever, because they don't have the time to do the rest of it. It's difficult to do stuff like this, especially when you have a family, because then you're having to make a decision that, okay, within these set amount of times, that's all the time that I'm going to spend towards this thing that I feel is important to help satisfy that desire that I have put upon myself to meet the expectations for the thing that's important to me. But after that, then I'm not going to do it anymore. Or after that, I'm just going to continue doing everything else. But within this time frame, I will allow myself not to feel guilty for this thing within these parameters, which you've planned ahead in advance. And that's okay, because that's realistic. But when people put these unrealistic expectations on themselves, they start feeling that pressure from themselves. And that pressure will kill you. Literally, figuratively, spiritually, motivationally, it will kill you, because instead of focusing on the things that you are accomplishing, you in effect are just flooding yourself with the things that you're not doing. And I've met people like that. It's kind of like I was talking with Chase in an episode of the Pat podcast that I accidentally deleted. It's terrible. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer's chasing Albert Einstein's theories and his experiments, and he's trying to catch up to him. He's trying to come up with as many inventions as him, but he fell short. And then all of a sudden he realizes that there is an invention he made that Albert Einstein had made, and he noticed that it was in the museum, and he wanted to go and destroy it, and he couldn't do it. And because he was like, oh, he was just a poor guy, invented it like me. And then later in the show, there's a part where they're on the news and said, hey, we found this inside of the Albert Einstein exhibit, and it's that hammer, that automatic hammer, and it was the greatest thing in the world. And I feel like the episode of Simpsons was trying to make a point with that, which is because you were so focused on the things that you couldn't do, the expectations you couldn't meet, you failed to see the amazing thing that you did already create. You failed to see the amazing thing you already created because you were so focused on the things that you hadn't done yet. You know, success is an outward perspective. You know, you look at a person and you say that person's successful, and you look at this person and you just say that person's not successful. But then here comes somebody else and say, well, that person is actually successful, and the other person that you thought was successful, that's not successful. It's an outward perspective. So you are placing that on someone else and saying that that's amazing. That's an outstanding thing that they did. Whereas you yourself are looking at yourself and saying, I'm not as successful as that person. You're trying to give yourself the definition of successful or unsuccessful and looking at yourself inward, but you can't do that because you are based inward. You can't do that. Instead, I think it's better to just look at everything that you're doing and one by one say, this is a good idea. I'm done with it. I'm moving on to the next one. And keep it to mind your business in a sense. You know what I mean? Mind your business. Don't try to compare yourself to others. That's where you begin to fail. Don't create those idealistic expectations of yourself. Yes, if there's something you want to do to help out humanity and your fellow man, pick something and do it really, really well and stay with it. But don't try to do everything, because that's where people let themselves down, and that's when they become the external pressures of guilt. See that original person that I was talking about who wanted to buy a cat because they felt guilty because they wanted to buy a cat? Those are the people that have those internal pressures of guilt. That's that initial person. Self-pressured guilt is the worst thing you can do to yourself. Have realistic expectations. Have unrealistic expectations, but then measure them and decide if they're worth doing. If you want a better explanation on the whole motivation that goes into something like that, listen to the podcast that I had on motivation. I talk about that very in depth, at least my understanding of it. And then decide whether or not it's worth your guilt. Now, there are some things that go without say: taking care of your family, taking care of your health, taking care of your finances, you know, and in my opinion, your spiritual beliefs, because I feel like those are all major components to living a successful life. Even if, you know, success is defined by a million different things, if you have those base things, you have that foundation, you're fine. But if those aren't for you, then that's fine too. But you have to decide what those pressures are, and then decide if they're worth applying. And do not apply them to yourself if it's too much. But you have to decide that. No one else is going to tell you, oh, you're doing too much. Because you know what? That's the other thing too. You're doing too much. Oh man, you're all over the place. You're constantly, you're a jack of all trades, and I know I can count on you for anything because you're always willing to help. That is dangerously irresponsible for anybody else to say to you. Because a person who feels internal pressure about guilt will take that as a compliment. They won't take that as a, oh wow, they really do understand my problem when I'm trying to help other people. I just really want to do my best to help everyone. You know, I want to help everyone because I see that, you know, the Sarah McLachlan commercial has the cat, and poor cat, no one fed it, so I have to go feed it. And they'll take that, oh, you work so hard, as a compliment, and they'll try to work even harder. Or they'll they can't say no to people. They don't know how to say no to people because they can't say no to themselves. They can't say no to the guilt that they have inside themselves. And then they turn that into their character. They turn their guilt into their character of who they are as a person, and they begin expecting other people to do things exactly the way that they do things. And when they don't, they condemn those people. I mean, I'm talking from a purely philosophical standpoint here, so I don't want to get into specifics of examples of that. But I think if you looked very easily into our world, you would see people who do that, where they feel very passionate about something, and then they put their guilt and expectations on other people, and because they're trying to justify their own irrational, very emotionally driven pressures on themselves, because they're trying to justify it to themselves, they're putting that on other people. And that's dangerous, and that's awful. It's dangerous for them because they're self-destructing and they don't even realize it. And it's dangerous for other people because people who are inclined to believe that, who are easily taken advantage of, will believe into that. And it's awful. And really the answer to avoid that is to decide what you believe for yourself and not give yourself such high expectations. Not everybody is Superman. Not everybody is Superwoman. Nobody is. Nobody should have to be Superwoman or Superman or Iron Man or Captain America. They should be who they are within their realm of life, and do the best they can with what they have with where they are. It doesn't mean you don't aspire to be new things, but you don't kill yourself doing it in the sake of something out of guilt of like, I should be better. Look at these people who aspire to be doctors, and I'm so happy that so many of them do aspire to be doctors. But the problem with that is that some of them are doing it because they genuinely like helping people. They're actually interested in medicine. They're actually interested in helping people. But other people do it because they want the social status of being a doctor. And those are the people that are dangerous to have as doctors because they'll never believe that they're wrong, or they'll hate the fact that they got there, or even worst case scenario, they failed out of medical school. Now they got all this debt and they've lost any respect for themselves, and they're stuck in this ugly mindset that they failed for something that probably wasn't what they wanted to do anyway, but everybody else told them that that's what you were supposed to do. It's a guilt that you press upon yourself, and you have to learn to take that guilt off. And it's not always easy. It is not easy. It is very difficult. But once you train yourself to stop putting that pressure on yourself, eventually you stop putting that pressure on yourself and you're free of that guilt. Then you put on realistic expectations, and regardless of whether or not it's successful to other people, or hell, even to yourself, you are appreciative to yourself because, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. You do see it as successful yourself, and you're happy. If the overall goal of the human spirit is to be happy, then you've achieved it despite other people's perspectives. And that's the most valuable thing you can do. Be happy despite other people's perspectives. Now, willing that that happiness is on good things as opposed to destructive things. You should never, people will always be satisfied in their fake happiness doing destructive things. But if you can find happiness outside of those destructive things, you've really made it, because no matter what happens, you're not going to have any regrets. Because you'll be satisfied with the amount of pressure you put on yourself, which wasn't too much, or maybe wasn't enough. And that is an answer that only you can have. But that's my opinion on guilt. That's my opinion on guilt with other people. That's my opinion on guilt of concept, and how you have to almost transcend those emotional states and just go off of what you truly believe based off of measurement and concept. Measurement of the concept, measurement of the self, measurement of external people. The last thing I'll have to say on that is, before you let an external force, an external person, affect your ability to feel guilty about something, look at the life that person's leading and decide for yourself. Don't go around telling anybody else. Look at that person and decide, is that person happy? Does that person look like they have it together? Or are they just acting like it? Measure it. Check it. And if you don't feel that this person is someone that you can aspire to be to, or you would respect or trust, don't feel guilt from that person. It doesn't mean you shun them. That doesn't mean you treat them badly. It just, don't feel guilt from that person. Always treat them with respect and all this stuff, but do not feel guilty from that person. And that's just my opinion. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pat Podcast. Please visit our website at jackassexpress.com. Also go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/jackassexpress. And don't forget to go to our YouTube channel, where if you type in Jackass Express, you're going to see our logo. The cool thing that Christopher Thompson designed for us with the donkey and the little microphone. I thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great day. I will see you next time. Farewell.